All right, we're going to try to do exercise 8-1, which is using an array and a list. So I have the starter files for 8.1 open, and I'm going to go into the code for form invoice total. And step 2 says declare 2 module level variables, which we know those go right here in the class, not in the sub procedure. One of them is an array that can hold up to 5 invoice totals. So here we're going to do dim invoice totals for as decimal. It can hold to 5, so we're using the upper bound of 4 because we count from 0 to 4. And then we also need an index you can use to work with that array. So dim I as integer, and that's going to start at 0. Alright, step 3, add code that adds the invoice total to the next element in the array each time the user clicks button calculate. So every time the user clicks button calculate, all this is the same. We have the invoice total at this point, and here the form's filled in and all that stuff. And right here I'm going to put here step 3 so we know what we're talking about. So I need to, my array is called invoice totals. I'm going to say invoice totals, and the location of that is I. And I'm going to set that to be equal to the invoice total. And then, so at this point, we run this one time, we get the invoice total. The invoice total gets stored in position 0 of my array, and then we need to increment I. So I moves up to 1, we run this again, etc., etc. Alright, that was step 3. Step 4, add code that displays all the invoice totals in the array in a message box when the user clicks the exit button. Alright, so here we're handling the click of the exit button, and before we close the application, we're going to show a message box that lists all the invoice totals. So dim invoice totals as, I'm going to call this, what am I going to call this? Invoice message. That's great. Okay, so invoice message is there. To do this, use a for each loop. So I'm going to say for each, and actually, can I do a code snippet? I'm going to go to loops, and I want a for each. All right. So for each total as decimal in invoice totals. So what am I going to do with this thing? I'm going to say invoice message equals invoice message, and so it's whatever the invoice message previously was, and I'm going to do format currency total, and then throw a new line on there. So this warning is telling me invoice message is used before it's been declared a value. Of course, when I declare it, I'm going to make it empty. Alright, that took care of that problem. So this is step 4. This is still step 4, and then finally we're going to do a message box dot show invoice message. We'll call this invoice totals, and let's check it out. So R650 and C400, and I think it tells us to do 3 invoices. And T250. So I hit exit, And here's my invoice totals here. As you can see, these are the totals that are down here, not the subtotal that I entered. And this is position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is my 5 in my array. And the last two are empty, because it goes through every single one of them, not just the ones that have values. So that was step 5 that we tested it. Step 6 is fix this problem, the problem of the empties, by adding an if statement into the for each loop that ignores any array elements that are equal to 0. So I'm going to say if total is equal to 0, then I think I could do like a continue. I believe that's right. I'm going to test this right now. So R650 and C650, hit exit. There we go. All right, that looks really good. So I wanted to test that before I explain what's going on. And this is step 6. So if total is equal to 0, then continue for means jump right back to the beginning of the for loop. Don't do anything else. There's many different ways you could have done this. You could have said if total is greater than 0, then do this stuff. You could have done if total is not equal to 0, do this stuff. I chose to look to see if total is equal to 0. If it is, I just skip this stuff. Alright, test out the program by entering more than 5 invoices. When you do, an out of range exception should be thrown. So what happens here are 200, are 400, are 600, are 650, are 800. So that was 5, and then even if I put like 250 in again, index out of range, because remember when we declared our array, we said it's going to hold 5 objects, giving it an upper bound of 4. So when I went to enter the 6th one, we hit out of range. So, a couple things you can do is you can make sure that I doesn't get to be bigger than the size of your array. You can put this stuff here in a try catch, and you can catch that out of range exception, or we can use a list instead, because a list will grow dynamically. And I believe that's what, oh, we're not there yet. Okay, sorry, I jumped ahead. Step 8, sort the invoice totals in the array. So right here, step 8. Okay, so I need to sort the invoice totals. I'm going to use array.sort, and I'm going to pass to it invoice totals. And now when I run this, we're going to say like C600, and then so that gave me a total of 420, and then 200 gives me 160. When I hit exit, the 160 appears before the 420. So that sorted the invoice totals for me. Test it. We just did that. That was step 9. And now we're going to modify the program so it uses a list. So up here, I'm going to add a list. So I have my variable called invoice list, and it's a new list of decimals. So previously we were adding the invoice total to the array and incrementing the counter, but this is still, let's say, step 10 more. This more step 10. I have invoice list dot add, and I'm going to add to it invoice total. So we don't have to worry about the index when we're adding items to our list. All right, so we have, oops, this is step 10. We created the invoice list, we added things to it. Coming down here, I'm going to need another invoice list message. So this invoice list message is a string that's going to hold, you know, the message box when I show what's being stored in the list, which is going to be the same as the array. And then here we sort it. And down here, I need to loop through each of them, each of the items in the list. So I'm going to go to a code snippet again. I want a loop, and I want a for next. For I equals 0 to invoice list dot, we have dot count. This is going to be a lot of the same. And this should start at 0. So if invoice list position 0 is equal to 0, then continue. Otherwise, here we're using invoice list message. The value is this, and the new line. So this is my build the message from the values in the list. That's what this loop is. This previous loop was build the message from the values in the array. So I have two different messages. I have invoice message and invoice list message. And I'm going to show invoice message, and then I'm going to show invoice list message. Just going to put the word list in there. So what should happen, if I did this correctly, is when I run the application, every time I add a value, it gets added to the array and the list. So I just added 3 values. When I hit exit, it first fails. Alright, well, it should have shown the invoice message first. Okay, simple mistake. So I'm using the debugger here. I can see what invoice message and invoice list message is, and they look right. They look good so far. But if you think about this, we're starting at 0, and we're going to the count. So if I had 3 in here, it would start at 0, and then it would do 1, and then it would do 2, and then it would do 3. Well, position 3 doesn't exist. Only 0, 1, and 2 exist. I need to go to count minus 1. Alright, my bad. Let's run that again. So R600, and then I want C600, and then I want C400. Now I hit exit. This is the array of invoice totals, 284, 24, 50. And this is the invoice list totals, 284, 24, 50. Same information. It's actually a different variable. So there you have it. So the list, let me just walk you through the list, which is step 10 again, because there are multiple parts to step 10. We declare a module level variable to hold the invoice list. And then we take the invoice total and we add it to the list. This is on the click of button calculate. So for the array, it took 2 lines, these 2 lines. For the list, it takes 1 line. All right, and then I have another, when the user clicks the exit button or closes the window. What are we doing here? We have, actually only when the user clicks the exit button. We have another variable called invoice list message, which is a string that starts as empty. We sort the invoice list by calling invoice list.sort. And then we have a loop that goes from 0 to the count of the invoice list minus 1. If the value is equal to 0, then continue. Otherwise, add it here. and then show that message. So I have two message box.shows. The first one is the array, and the second one is the list. All right, and that is exercise 8-1.